Okay, we're actually now going to start with our panel presentation. So the teams from across BC share their experiences leading patient-oriented research. The panel will be moderated by the lovely Ellie Griffith, who is sitting right here. Ellie is the Assistant Vice President, Research Programs at Health Research BC. Please, everyone, welcome Ellie.
Hi everyone, we have the special after lunch slot. So our job is to try and keep you engaged for the next hour for this great panel discussion. I just wanted to start off by saying thank you very much first to Elder Ruth for her really wonderful, warm introduction this morning. I had a chance to have a quick chat with her. I feel very privileged as a settler on these lands, the traditional unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, to be able to live, work and play here. And actually today I've really been reflecting on also feeling just very privileged to be in this room with so many amazing people. I go to various events in different kinds of communities, but I think this event really brings out the kind of warmth in people, and it's just really amazing. You can really pick up on everyone's passion and dedication to the work that they do. So I feel very privileged to be here on the stage. So in this panel, we're going to explore the value of patient-oriented research, and I think many of you already have some ideas about that, but hopefully you'll learn some new perspectives, but also provide a realistic picture of what it's like working in this way. So we have two dynamic duos, two teams to highlight the importance of collaboration between researchers and patients, and that this challenge is a challenge worth undertaking. The outcome of patient-oriented research is enriched research evidence that can lead to better patient care, good relationship between researcher and patient as partner. And as I said, we hope you'll all learn some new tips and tricks along the way. So I'm going to describe the structure of this panel just so you all know what to expect. If any of you are thinking of sneaking a quick nap in, you can think when you want to plan your post-lunch nap into this. So we have four sections. Firstly, we're going to have some opening statements from our panelists. And then we're going to have a structured discussion asking the pairs to speak about their experiences of working together. We'll then have some lightning questions and some closing remarks. We're not going to have the audience Q&A today for this panel because we have plenty of thoughts to hear and experiences to share up here on the stage. So you can relax, sit back and enjoy the discussion. So I'm going to start off by introducing our panelists. And I'm going to try and do it the order they're sitting. Okay, so first we have Jimena Chalchi, who is Asta Mayan, and she is a researcher and Indigenous knowledge holder. Jimena is a research and network support coordinator with the BC Network Environment for Indigenous Health Research. And I didn't practice saying that too many times because that's quite a mouthful. She's joining us today to provide an Indigenous perspective on community engagement and to share a broader perspective of the term patient partner that reflects all experiences of people with lived experiences. Jimena works closely with Julianne. Julianne Barry is Ojibwe from Chigang First Nation and grew up and continues to reside on the Syilx Okanagan Nation. Julianne is a research associate also with the BC Network Environment for Indigenous Health Research. And then we have Davina Banner, and Davina is a cardiovascular and rural health researcher, nurse educator, and palliative care practitioner. Davina holds a number of leadership roles in BC and is the Interim Associate Vice President, Research Operations and Professor at the University of Northern British Columbia. And then, finally, last but not least, we have Mark Baines. And Mark is a heart transplant recipient diagnosed with heart failure at the age of 23. Mark is a patient lead for the Canadian Heart Function Alliance and co-founder of the Heart Life Foundation. So with that, I'd just like you all to join me in welcoming our panelists to the stage. Okay, so we're going to jump into some these are introductory questions just to get everyone warmed up on stage. We did talk about doing a dance, But we didn't have enough prep time and the stage was a little narrow, so I thought I wouldn't address that kind of health and safety risk in that way. So Mark, we're going to start with you. If you could please tell us a little about your story and what motivated you to strengthen research as a patient partner.
Of course. Wow, the mic did turn on as soon as you called my name. That's impressive. I hope no one falls asleep. No pressure. You're saying take your nap, but if I catch you taking a nap, I'm going to point it out. We'll keep you laughing. I was diagnosed with heart failure at the age of 23. That was way back in 2008. I still look pretty young, right? Thank you. It's a new room, so I can use that joke again. Sorry for those that heard that before. When I was diagnosed, it was the first time that I heard the words heart and failure in the same sentence. I had no idea what that meant to me. I had no one around me that had heart failure, and I didn't know what my trajectory was going to be. Luckily for me, I had the right support mechanisms, I had the right care team, I had the right mentors that showed me that heart failure didn't have to define who I was. So I lived with heart failure for 10 years. I had my heart transplant on June 6, 2018. Been successfully living with that. Throughout my diagnosis, I've had the opportunity to give back. I participated in research studies in the past. I was patient number X. But when I started getting involved in advocacy, I started being a patient partner in research. And what motivated me was really looking at some of the studies. And when we look at a lot of the studies regarding heart failure, we see that the population that they study are elderly white males. Nothing against elderly white males. They run our banks and our countries. All the power. But how did this research apply to me? How was it going to impact me moving forward and the community that I got to know and understand? So that's what motivated me to get involved in research, to show that there's a broader community within heart failure and cardiovascular disease that needs to be studied.
Thank you, Mark. And Davina, can you tell us a little bit more about what motivated you to get more involved in involving patients in your research?
Thank you for having me. And I am a nurse as my professional background, and my passion for research. Is that better? Oh.
Yep.
No, I'm not going to do an Adele today, but save that for later. As Ellie had mentioned, I'm a nurse, and my love for research really started as a student nurse. And then when I was new into practice in cardiac ICU, I started to look around and see differences and disparities in care and outcome. And it was quite profound. And so I started really my research journey through curiosity, a desire to make things better. And then that started a journey through doctoral studies, and I became really interested in the intersections between healthcare providers' experiences, the health system, and patient experiences. And so it was a bit of a natural transition when patient-oriented research started to really emerge. It was a space I was already passionate about, and also a space where I thought, this just makes logical sense. And I think that the more I think about it, I'm like, I don't know why we have never always been working in this way. Like, it seems incredible to me now. I also had a growing interest in what it meant to work together, and was very fortunate to work with Ian Graham, studying IKT methods, and then eventually through the support of the BC Support Unit and the beautiful community that they've created here, patient-oriented research methods and what that means in co-production. And so just a deep passion again. And it really led to some diverse opportunities, both being so fortunate to work in co-leadership with Mark in many cardiovascular spaces, but also more recently in other communities that I don't have clinical expertise or even really research expertise, but find myself able to support methods. And so I know some of the folks from Praxis are here, and many others, and just the great privilege to work in partnership. So that was my journey. And really, I think if I said one thing, I'd say what keeps me here and keeps me so deeply passionate is that it humanizes the research process. It humanizes who we are. I think, when we bring those perspectives together, we all become patients in the room. We are all patients on the team. And that just keeps us focused on what we need to do to make things better. And I think with that, just the amount of grace shown, I think it's really changed a lot of ways of understanding research and what it means to be a researcher, and just the amount of learning that I've had personally and professionally from working with amazing folks like Mark.
Thank you, Davina. Jimena, we're going to go to you next. Could you please share with us your perspective on the term patient partner from an Indigenous perspective?
Is that, yeah. Well, first of all, thank you to all your ancestors and your hearts and everyone in your family who opened the opportunity for you to come and be here and to open your ears to what I have to share. So feeling really privileged and happy to do this. So patience. First, I cannot speak from an indigenous perspective because within indigenous there are like so much diversity. But what I can speak is from the teachings I have received. And what my elders tell us, like, you sit still, because while you sit still, you can listen, you can observe. You are not patient. You are not there, like, in this expectation of somebody coming to do it for you. You sit still, you connect to nature, to the river, to the water, to the trees, and listen and observe, and then you will have answers. Right? So in that sense, we don't use the word patient, and we don't refer to the people who comes from healing as patients. We always speak about agency, stewardship, and it also brings to different concepts where in indigenous health systems, or the ones that I have studied, people are not at the center. At the center we have nature. And if nature is healthy, everyone will be healthy, not only humans, but animals, plants, rivers, mountains, and the heart of everything in the cosmos will be healthy. So there are no patients. Everybody is a steward. Now, when sickness comes, it's also not coming to an individual, it's coming to the family. And you are not left alone with your problem. All the family engages. So in short words, we talked about people with lived experience, because the mother gets sick if the son is sick. The partner gets sick if the other partner is sick. Like, the sickness comes to the family and to the community. That's why nobody can be just patient. Like, everybody has to be agent and steward. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Julianne, how do you take an inclusive approach to including people with lived experience in the research that you do?
Is it on? Okay,
Yes.
perfect. I see all these buttons on these other microphones, but not on mine. So thank you, Mark. Thank you very much. And first off, thanks everyone to come, to listen, to hear. I think what you are doing is so important, bringing in patient partners, bringing in community. So from my perspective, just centering myself, I work with Indigenous communities, so I think of less patient partner, patient-oriented care or research, and more Indigenous community-led research. In addition, often in speaking to that inclusive approach, we think of, or I think of it as an ethical and respectful engagement. So how do I lead ethical engagement within the work that I do and the work that I do alongside Indigenous communities? So kind of bringing that, I think one of the first main aspects in my eye with an inclusive or ethical approach is really language. I think language is huge. So language, terminology, maybe medical jargon, or all those terms are really important when it comes to how we describe things, how we express ourselves. I think that language is really important to think about is it strength-based? Is it culturally relevant? Is it accessible? Is it gender inclusive and gender expansive? Making sure that how we describe, how we express are following that, because making ethical engagement, making those connections with community and relationship building, our language can either help facilitate or it can really help or hinder how we make those connections. So I think language is really important within that inclusive approach or ethical engagement. And then taking from that, I read this the other day, so I'm just going to read it off my notes. It is from the NWAC toolkit. To really recognize, interrogate, and actively resist the ways that language reinforces power and consequently experiences of privilege and oppression. So I really like that from the NWAC toolkit, which is fantastic as well if you are looking to engage with Indigenous communities. So following up on language, and I kind of already alluded to it, is really relationship building. So working with patients, working with patient partners, populations, and with Indigenous communities, you cannot do research without having a relationship. So relationship building comes first. We have to acknowledge that we go into community, build those relationships, and those relationships are always ongoing, and they always happen before the research starts. So once we have those research or relationships built, we still want to maintain that ethical engagement, that inclusive approach. So we need to ensure that we know that each patient population, Indigenous community, everyone, they are distinct, they are unique, and they have their own needs and priorities. So making sure the research approach maintains ethical and respectful. So some considerations, and I'll just briefly describe a few, is really, as the researcher, be knowledgeable about, the community. Do some homework, look at their websites, look at their programs, look at their plans. What are their needs and priorities? So it's your responsibility as a researcher to do that. It's not the community's responsibility. So really looking at that, working with Indigenous communities. Do you have cultural safety training? Working with other patient partners, there's other trainings, unconscious bias and training that maybe you should look into before going into community or working with patients or patient populations. A few other things, and I'm sure we'll discuss further, but really leading to and taking direction from community. So communities have governance models. What are their governance? What are their ethics? What are their protocols for engagement? So following those and making sure you uphold those as a researcher. Making sure that your approach includes community throughout. So in the beginning, relationship building, but all of the process, the research process, before, during, and after. And making sure that your relationship is ongoing and looking at sustainable relationships. And then one big thing also being flexible. So you want to be flexible, adaptable, and I think we heard that today, not to be afraid to make mistakes, and equally be open to learning from those mistakes. So I think there's a lot to say, but that's where I'll end it now.
Thank you, Julianne. So we're going to move into a bit more of a structured discussion, and Julianne, you touched really nicely there on the importance of relationships. So we really want to hear a little bit more about your relationships and kind of the working together experience. So we're going to alternate between the pairs of working together, and for each question we'll ask the first pair to give a bit longer response and the second pair just to follow up if you have any additional questions to add. And we'll start with Mark and Davina. So can you just actually tell us how you both started working together and how you got connected?
Sure, I'll start. Do you guys have all day? No. Davina and I started working together in 2016. It was actually just around the time that HeartLife had started. And so we were really making an active effort into advocacy, full-fledged advocacy, I would say, a part of that being research participation. We met at a BC Yukon CCCN event, Canadian Cardiovascular Nursing event. If you've ever been to one of those, they're real jammers. I'm not even kidding. They have a good time. And Davina, there's some nurses in the room, yeah. Davina approached us and said, hey, you know, there's this pilot study. We're working with some patient partners already. We want more patient partners. And it was really to better understand networks. And correct me if I'm wrong on any of this. That first project was a learning experience. I won't say it was a failed experience because we took a lot of learnings from that. And ultimately, we were able to actually get a larger grant to study more networks. One of them, CanSolve, is in the room today, I think. CanSolve, yeah, and other networks to study conflicts of interest in research, patient engagement in research, so how networks were doing this. And that really began our journey, our now 8-year journey into our partnership together. Go ahead, Davina.
Yeah, I think we're probably 5 or 6 projects in, but most of them have really fed around that desire to promote engagement and to really centralize that voice of lived experience in research. And I think that was something that we felt very important when we looked at health research networks that are increasingly funded to do that. And so it was a great opportunity for us to, advance in the methods field as well as some of the context pieces.
And I think what really made the difference for me was this was the first time that a researcher was approaching us, HeartLife, me as a patient partner versus just a check mark. Davina said, we really want to engage you in this research project. And I thought to myself, I know absolutely nothing about research, so I better make something up. But it was that real effort by Davina, I think, to say, hey, Mark, this is how we're engaging patients, and here's who we want to improve the process. And that just created this sense of wanting to be involved. And that changed my thought processes on how we can be patient partners in research. So I thank Davina for that.
And I thank Mark wholeheartedly too, because I think when we started the journey, we both agreed that it had to be authentic and it had to be meaningful, and you know, we wanted to do this in the right way, and we've, between us, turned down different opportunities, even things that would have been quite lucrative financially in terms of grants and things that would have looked pretty damn impressive on a CV, I think, just for fear of the fact that that didn't fit with that value. And, you know, we decided long ago we're not invested in tokenism, and we want to keep challenging, and we want to keep, you know, we want to keep the conversation going. And I've been very privileged to be a sidekick and to watch Mark also do the mic drops in various places, because we need to challenge and we need to have those open conversations and things like that. And I think even more recently, we've been able to work together by co-leading a platform of patient partners for a national organization, and that's been a new but really fulfilling enterprise. But also we've done some really crazy things, like gone to the ledge and, you know, done a bit of shit disturbing there as well. And so, you know, any place we can get together and really promote the need to centralize the voice of patients, that lived experience, as a real agent for change. And so I look forward to many more shenanigans along the way, but still learning together. Never perfect, but
always progressing.
Always progressing.
Great, thank you. Juliana and Jimena, can you tell us how you started working together?
Okay, well, we're slightly different. So I joined the BC NEAR a year ago, and this is actually my first time meeting in person, Jimena. But I'll just share how the BC NEAR, how we're connected. So the British Columbia, and I had to practice this quite a bit when I started working with them, Ellie. So yes, the British Columbia Network Environments for Indigenous Health Research. It really focuses on upholding, respecting, advancing self-determined research led by communities. So it's less about us partnering with communities for research, but it's more about upholding their rights for them to lead their own identified research So the BC NEAR supports Indigenous collectives, communities, and organizations within BC by providing funding to ICCOs, where the funding goes directly to the ICCOs, where they can lead that research without a gatekeeper such as a university. So that's a little bit about the BC NEAR and how we are connected. If you wanted to share a bit, Hannah.
Thank you. Well, I'm a little like weaving what we have spoke. I think what unites us is intention. Whatever we want to do, it's intention. It's like that light in the other side. And you can see it, but a lot of other people can also see it. And sometimes you get there and people is there, right? It's like, hi. And then whatever needs to happen, happens. So BC NEAR is one of those lights that's shining there for those who are interested in research. And we go and approach and we meet each other, and that's how we work. Same with community engagement. It's similar, like we go with an intention and yeah, it just happens. Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you. So one of the things I was interested to ask about was some of the kind of foundational principles that you might bring to working together. So in your work with BC NEAR, Jimena and Julian, what kind of principles in working with people with lived experience in Indigenous communities do you bring to that work? And do you have any examples of kind of how that shows up in the work that you do?
I would start with what she already said. It's like humility, cultural humility, professional humility, and a deep awareness that those who were privileged enough to go to university and get a grade and this researcher title are as entitled as a community member who never did that but has been dealing with the situation for the same amount of years that you have done in school. And in this space of agency that we find in Indigenous communities, it's easy to find the leaders. It's easy to hear the voices if you approach and listen. So I would say deep listening, it's the second one. So humility, like real humility, first one. Second will be deep listening, to really go and listen what they need, even though you have so many plans and deadlines and grants to fulfill. As well, that's not what they want. And that's it. So that will be the second. And the third will be asking. Like once you have listened, then you can ask, how can I help with what I know, right? Like I have all these titles and knowledge. How this menu of knowledge can help you and your community? And just allow that to happen. So that will be my formula.
So maybe I can share a little bit. So prior to working with the BC NEAR, I did work with urban Indigenous communities, so Friendship and Métis centers, working more in partnership with those communities. So just adding on to what was said, after that, going in, that deep reflection of yourself, listening to community. As a researcher, it's really important to continue working with communities in respecting their protocols. Once that continues, it's important to realize that working with community, having those community agreements, so making sure that you as a researcher and the community have ideas of what the roles should be, what the responsibilities should be, going into early on what the data governance is. So what are those Indigenous ethical protocols around data sharing? So that's really important as a researcher as well, other than just making sure, those ongoing relationships. And one point, going to community, visiting community, being in community, I think that's required to listen, to hear what the voices are saying. But I just wanted to also add, just making sure that you are going in with an ideal of sustainability of those relationships, which we've heard today. Working with communities and working with lots of those centers, I sat down with community members and they said, you know, we had people come in, they ran these great programs around diabetes, obesity, we learned a lot, and then they were gone. We don't know where they went, they didn't come back. So as a researcher, building in sustainability practices within the relationship, working for that transformation, can I work with the health authorities? Can we keep this sustainable after we're done, after our funding is done? So yeah, going in, deep listening, and making sure that you're there for the long haul.
Great, thank you. And Davina and Mark, and if you can keep your answers short, because we have a couple more we're going to get to, but can you maybe pick kind of one kind of core principle of working with patients and engaging patients that you think is important you want to highlight today?
I think accountability in that relational process is a commitment to learn and to work together, but also a commitment to go about things in the right way and learn when things don't go well. And I think keeping that openness is really important. So I think that's probably one other thing I would say.
Yeah, I would say that communication is key with a lot of research projects and ongoing communication. It's kind of hurry up and wait. So you bring in a patient partner, you get started, and then you're waiting for a grant, and you're conducting the research. But that regular ongoing communication is important to keep patient partners engaged throughout the entire process. And that's what you want to do, communicate from the beginning, in the middle, and all the way to the end.
Great, thank you. So it's been really great hearing all your perspectives and all the great stories, and it's clear that you seem to have these fantastic relationships working together and great communication and accountability and respect. But we also want to hear about what some of the challenges are. So Julianne and Davina, from the perspective of a researcher, are there any kind of challenges that you've encountered in this engagement work, and do you have any examples you'd be kind of comfortable sharing with this audience?
Probably many examples of things that I've probably done wrong, but again, I think in that spirit of really being humble and learning, it's that piece, right? We learn, we do better next time. I want to pick up what Mark said around that kind of notion of fast, slow in research, and we come together, we look at an issue that we want to work on, and there's that huge race for the grant, and then 6 months where it's dead silent, and I think one of the challenges is that we don't have a lot of programmatic funding. And what I mean by that is that we have to build our partnerships through all these individual projects. And so it makes it really hard then when we want those sustained relationships to make that happen in the right way and to resource and support those teams. Because it's not just the two of us, it's a whole team. And so I think that's one of the big barriers I see, is just often trying to piece together funding so that we can continue with this shared vision. And it's sometimes it's hard, and there's lulls and uncertainties, and so that's a challenge. I think picking up again on communication, it's something I battle with so much, and I constantly feel guilty that, I try and do my best, but I think in a world where we're bombarded with hundreds of emails, and the day goes by and I'm, oh man, I was meant to do that today, and that weighs heavily on me, and it's not that it's a challenge, it's part of the relationship, but it's something that you commit to, and it's something I know I need to work on and keep working on, and then I think revisiting goals and being prepared to shift and change, recognizing that when we work with people with lived experience, they have their own health journeys that they're navigating, but also researchers too, and I'd had a lot of grace shown to me when I'd had issues in family that meant I had to step away for a while. And I think, again, going back to that pace of, being humble, being human, being about the bigger picture of that partnership, it can help you overcome certainly some of the challenges. But
Absolutely. So probably along the same lines, I think a big challenge is the needs and priorities of the researcher and the community. So, researcher, publish, perish, all these different things, wanting to go fast to get those grants or needing to go fast and show how many grants and how many publications. But then with community, it's, sometimes research is not a priority. Sometimes it's floods, fires, deaths, COVID-19, overdoses, lots of different things that happen in community where, just wait a second, we got to step back. We can't do this research project. This is not what we need. This is not where we need to be. And that leads back into sustaining that relationship. Okay, we're going to step back to respect community or respect the patient, but in saying that, what do we do for funding or sustaining this relationship and continuing that? So I completely agree. And I think another really big challenge, and I can't get into it all, administrative barriers. So, right, fighting those systems, transforming those systems, working with communities and Indigenous elders, providing honoraria or gifts, oh no, we can't provide that funding until after it's done. Well, that's not protocol within community. So just looking at how can we stand up, how can we transform, and how can we start making those shifts for our communities, for our patients, for our patient populations.
Great, thank you. And Mark and Jimena, from your perspective, obviously being engaged in research or with community, you're hoping to see an impact, and you're hoping that there's an impact on people and people's lives and human health. So that's some of the kind of motivating factors. And do you see, what are the challenges you see in kind of engaging in research and how that can actually lead to the impact for either you as the patient or patients like you or the communities that you work with?
My experience in Indigenous communities is normally when we arrive, they are already experimenting and researching. It's just so different approach to research. The methodologies are super different. They are embedded in the healing process. Like, for example, we have something called shama. Shama is it's like a kind of a diet that you do. But then let's say I'm sick of the belly. So what I will do, I'll do my shama, which is I will not tell anyone to heal me. I'll go, sit still, active, observe my body, my mind, my belly, nature around what I have eaten. And then I will bring it all together and I'll start washing with the plants that are around me, and then the plants will teach me, and then they are the first ones telling me what is happening with me, So by the moment that somebody comes and tells like, how can I help you? It's like, oh, well, you have it like super list, you already did all your inner research. And that's why I say like there is an active position from people because they are doing the research, no? And it's thinking in spirit, thinking in ways of thinking, in nature, spiritual world, and all the components, right, like of the Indigenous mindset. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and kind of building off everyone here, there's three kind of challenges that I foresaw. One, life happens, right? As a patient partner, especially living with heart failure, there was always this need for me to want to be involved. But from when Davina and I met to now, I think I went into cardiac arrest 8 times, 1 transplant, 2 times a cancer. So you can't always participate. So I mean, but there's an opportunity then and real need to have multiple patient partners involved, because then you get a diverse set of experiences. So I mean, challenge and solution. But the other part of that is changing that paternalistic view of I'm the researcher, you're the patient, I'm going to tell you how the research should be, versus, hey, we're on the same playing field. Let's co-create together. What matters to you? What matters to the community? How can we build research around that? And probably one of the biggest challenges, what still exists today, is that remuneration, compensation, acknowledgement of patient partners. What do you mean you want to get paid for your time? No, right? And it's a constant battle that we regularly face as patient partners. I would do a lot of work with our Canadian Heart Function Alliance, and Alex and Malcolm King. They lead our Indigenous research group. And Alex said to me, she said, Mark, our elders are doubly wise. They have the knowledge and they have the lived experience, but patients are doubly wise as well, and you need to be valued for that. And that always sticks with me. And so, I mean, it's very important to think that your patients are on equal footing and they deserve to be acknowledged and compensated.
Thank you. We're going to switch into just a couple of more kind of targeted questions as we head into the last section of our panel discussion. Jimena, what really motivates you to continue to do this work? You've talked about some of the kind of complexity and how much of kind of yourself and the communities you work with kind of has to go into that, but what motivates you to stay engaged?
Oh, I just find it like very, very like, I don't know, my first language is not English, so I will say entertaining, passionate, creative, like sitting with somebody who has this experience and knows the many different angles, and especially if you are like with a group of people who have not only one, but many perspectives, it's just like rich conversation, intellectual challenge, and also like a leadership challenge, right? Like, now how can we do this? Like just keep the conversation. So yeah, that's just that. Interesting, finding new ways.
Great, thank you. And Davida and Julianne, if there are any researchers here in the audience today or online who are kind of haven't really got involved either in community engagement or in patient-oriented research, what advice would you give to them in thinking about getting involved?
Absolutely. So after Mark mentioned that, power dynamics, I think, is a big thing to consider. It's probably not the first one to consider, but think about power dynamics. And it's a great example in speaking with Indigenous elders, about patient partners, being knowledgeable with that lived experience. And I've been involved in a project looking at a telehealth project with, healthcare professionals, MDs, and traditional healers. And that MD is being paid $350 per hour, whereas that traditional healer is being given maybe $100 honoraria for the hour. So power dynamics is huge. Obviously not the first thing to think about when you're getting in there, but obviously having that in your mind. Thinking about some recommendations is really a deep reflection of yourself. So taking that deep reflection, what are your biases, all of that, thinking, what are you bringing into this relationship? Why are you bringing it in? And why do you want to do the work? Is it because you're really passionate about the work? Or is it just something that you think is going to get you more funding? So thinking about why you want to do it and then really evaluating, should I do it? I think what we've heard today is really not being afraid to make mistakes. Mistakes are going to happen. You're learning together. But really be humble to learn from the people, the patients, Indigenous community members. Indigenous elders will definitely teach you along the way. And it's so important to listen and to reflect on that and really to deeply listen, to deeply hear, I think is really important. Be ready to be flexible. And adapt. So in my PhD, I worked on a randomized control trial, randomizing patients to HIT or MICT, so high intensity versus moderate intensity. After I was done, my supervisors went and brought that to the YMCA, and they were hoping that, okay, we're going to bring this to the Y, have HIT and MICT, and our patients or our clients coming in are going to be randomized. What did the people coming in? No, I don't want to be randomized. I want to pick what I want to do. So in saying that, okay, they took a step back and said, okay, we need to listen. So it's important to realize that it's important to be flexible. It's important to adapt and really listen to your patients, communities, patient populations. And I think I already said it, but really be ready to stand up and make change and advocate. So what are your ethics? What do they look like? Do you really need a 10-page ethics? Can you do it verbally? Can you do it 2 pages? What do community want? You're going to lose community members. You're going to lose patients when you give them all of this information that has no meaning to them. They don't want to read through that. So really stand up for the needs and priorities and change what you can change and just keep going and advocating.
That's amazing. And I totally wholeheartedly agree. And I'd say if I give any recommendation, I would say too is just building on that is, jump in with care and, do the work, do the reflection, do the learning. But just, I think in a relational process of building that trust and go for it, if you have that learning, that reflection, you're going to be fine. It's going to be a good experience. And so and I think be prepared for the personal and professional change that will come, I think, is when you build those relationships. And I've often said we start as colleagues, we become friends, and then we're family. And sometimes through the thick and thin, it's such a beautiful thing. And it's not just us as leads, it's a whole team. And so, just jumping in and modeling those relationships and staying true to the principles, I think, is really important. And again, as I said before, we've definitely decided not to go down some pathways. Again, staying in those value systems is important. And gradually people catch up too. And so, jump on in there. It's a fabulous community. And I think we see this here in this room, the wonderful relationships that are formed and the openness to learn. So,
thanks, Davina. And Mark, to any patients or people out there in the audience who are thinking about getting involved in research themselves, what advice would you give to them?
Yeah, no, I mean, great question. Tough question. Maybe I'll touch on 2 points if I can. One, just bouncing back on the researcher side. And I mean, I heard this is not mine. Listen to understand and not respond. So if you're a researcher, listen to understand your patient partner, not immediately to respond. I want to touch on that. As a patient partner, are you patient partners? Raise your hand. Are you in the room? Yeah? Round of applause for you to being involved. That's courageous. Good for you, first of all. As patient partners, we also hold a level of responsibility to get informed, to learn. And there's a lot of opportunities to learn how to be engaged in research as a patient partner. It builds confidence and empowers people. But also, and again, I heard this, it's not mine, be curious and not furious, right? When you're going into a project, be curious about what it means, what the impact's gonna be. And then like Davina said, jump in, but jump in strategically.
Great, thank you. We're coming towards the end of the time that we have up here, but I just wanted to ask you both in your pairs if you wanted to kind of summarize any final reflections back to the audience, not only from what we've talked about right here in this panel, but what you've heard today in the other presentations and discussions.
Thank you for this moment, because I've been all day trying to say this. Just sharing this learning I had, in all these circles, and I think Sean Wilson's and Roy Littlebird's tell it really good in how they explain this. So for indigenous mindsets, knowledge is something that belongs to nature and we can access. So our methodologies are accessing methodologies, we shower with plants, if what you want to know is about the plant. It's like a very experiential research, wayfinding. While in Western ways, we can see that knowledge is something that is reached and possessed and owned. And that's, I think, at the core of the difference between methodologies, healing, and all of that, right? So, just that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other final reflections or thoughts?
Oh, it's for me. Honestly, I'm really privileged to be on the stage with these individuals. I've learned a lot just from being on here and listening and learning. And I think that there's a lot of takeaways as a patient partner and as researchers in the audience that we can bring from this. Almost a little bit of a course in, I think, the right way to do engagement in research. And I'm honestly grateful to be here. I don't have any more keywords, anything that I can say, but it's important to engage the patient population, and you can see why from just being on the stage here.
Thank you, Mark. That's really great. I just want to thank our panelists now, and then I'll share a few closing comments.
I don't think anyone fell asleep, which is good, right? No one fell asleep.
Sorry, you're ready for the dance?
No one fell asleep, so we accomplished our goal.
Okay, great. Sorry, I thought you said you were ready for that interpretive dance thing we were talking about? Okay.
I only have jokes, no dances.
So I just wanted to wrap up with a few comments. I think like the discussion we've had here really kind of talks about the complexity of some of this work and engaging and working together, the importance of relationships and building trust. And as I said, I think we're not only feeling that here on the stage, but in the room today. It's been just, the ability to connect with people and the openness with which people kind of open their hearts and their life experiences here is really humbling. I also wanted to just reflect and as well as thanking our panelists today, thank my colleagues and those I work with for giving me the opportunity to learn more. Some of you may have been wondering why, as somebody who oversees research funding, and actually I didn't disclose this, but I'm actually a molecular geneticist by training. Why is she here on the stage talking about patient-oriented research? And since I joined Health Research BC 2 years ago, I've really been learning a lot more about patient-oriented research, about community engagement, about working with Indigenous partners and communities. And now I'm thinking that this was maybe a test by my colleagues to see if I was ready to take my training wheels off. And when they asked me if I would consider moderating this panel, they didn't really highlight that there were going to be 400 people, live, real people in a room in front of me, and that it was going to be broadcast live on the stream. Live on the stream, that sounds like something my mum would say. So I just want to really thank my colleagues and the team at Health Research BC and the BC Support Unit in giving me this opportunity. I've learned so much over the last today and yesterday and some of the events we had yesterday. So thank you so much to everybody, and I will be handing it back over to Victoria.